Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. More bodies have been found at a Canadian residential school, this time in Saskatchewan. A surgeon in Saskatchewan has been fired for what he says was speaking out against giving children the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. We spoke with a lawyer of Dr. Francis Christian. And we hear about a unique place in southwestern Alberta that pays tribute to our military history in the air.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Hundreds of more unmarked graves have been found at a former residential school on the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. Chief Cadmus DeLawrence says the number of human remains exceeds 600. The First Nation has been examining the Maryvale school site with the help of a team using ground-penetrating radar to locate the undocumented remains located around 165 kilometers east of Regina.
We started our radar penetrating research on June the 2nd of 2021. As of yesterday, we have hit 751 unmarked graves. This is not a mass grave site. These are unmarked graves. Of the 751 hits, the machine has a 10 to 15% error percentage. So we will only go by the hits that we have of 751, but we do know there's at least 600. The Pope needs to apologize for what has happened to the Maryvale Residential School, impact on Cowessess First Nation, survivors and descendants. An apology is one stage of many in the healing journey.
An Alberta First Nations chief says the province's $8 million influx to help locate the remains and honor the memories of residential school children in our province is a good first step. Chief Billy Moran of the Enoch First Nation west of Edmonton calls the funding a great reconciliation in the province with the highest number of residential schools. First Nations and Métis communities can apply for grants up to $150,000 for a range of purposes, including the search for unmarked graves or to pay for commemorative work such as grave markers. Some background information now on residential schools here in Canada. They were originally run by the Catholic, Anglican and United churches in the 1800s. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was Prime Minister of Canada from 1968 to 1979, allegedly supported the use of residential schools. His Minister of Indian Affairs at the time was former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, who was responsible for them. The federal Liberal government operated the Kamloops Residential School in the 1970s here in Canada. There's a unique ministry which deals with abandoned babies who have died. Linda Zanacco is author and founder of He Knows Your Name Ministries. She explains how her unique ministry came about.
The news headline said, "Baby doe found in a dumpster wearing only a diaper." And when I heard that, that's what gripped me. I thought, my mind swirled with questions, but I knew instantly that it was an assignment that had my name on it, because God instantly flipped it in my mind and in my heart. And all I could hear was, doe is not a name, and dumpster is not a grave, and a diaper is not burial clothing.
Catch this powerful interview with Linda from He Knows Your Name Ministries and Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our show. A surgeon in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan has allegedly been fired over voicing his concerns of giving children the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, which is representing Dr. Francis Christian, clinical professor of general surgery at the University of Saskatchewan, says the doctor was called into a meeting and suspended from all teaching responsibilities effective immediately. He'll be let go from his position with the U of S at the end of September of this year. Joining me now to talk about this further is Jay Cameron, lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, which is representing Dr. Christian. Jay, what were some of the big concerns Dr. Christian had with giving kids the mRNA vaccine?
He's concerned about informed consent, Hal. The vaccines haven't been studied. They haven't been approved for widespread use. They're still experimental, both in the United States and in Canada. And so he's concerned that parents and children cannot give informed consent because they don't adequately know what the risks are. They haven't been advised of what the risks might be. As we know, the CDC has now said that the risk of myocarditis, for example, heart inflammation, is 10 times what they thought it was. And so that needs to be something that parents and children consider.
Now, how do we know for certain that the reason why Dr. Christian was let go by the College of Physicians and Surgeons is that he spoke out against children receiving the vaccine?
Dr. Christian is an accomplished surgeon. He has had exemplary performance reviews. He's never faced professional discipline either from his employer or the College of Physicians. He's an upstanding member of the College of Physicians in Saskatchewan, and so he was released simply because he wants to have a conversation about the safety of these shots for people under the age of 18.
So, Jay, what's next for your client, Dr. Francis Christian?
Dr. Christian is preparing to litigate this issue. He has rights of freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And those rights are clearly being infringed. They're being censored by his employer, the College of Medicine. And I think it's important to note, Hal, that the basis of scientific inquiry is freedom of thought and debate and study. And everybody suffers when the marketplace of ideas is shut down in favor of an orthodoxy that you cannot even debate and have a conversation about.
Thanks so much, Jay. That was Jay Cameron, lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, which is representing fired Saskatchewan surgeon Dr. Francis Christian. As you've heard on Bridge City News, the province will be completely reopening as part of the Stage 3 Open for Summer plan, but there's still a mandatory face covering bylaw in effect for Lethbridge. Well, there's a group in our city which is demanding that the city repeal the bylaw and end Lethbridge's mask mandate. So far, the online petition put together by the Alberta Institute has garnered just over 2,000 signatures. On the petition, it states that the vulnerable have received both doses of the vaccine, and there are just 22 active cases here in our city. It also highlights that the local state of emergency and the provincial state of emergency in Alberta are no longer in effect. There's word that Lethbridge City Council may be looking into voting on potentially repealing our mandatory face covering bylaw at the next council meeting, which takes place on June the 29th. Our poll question this week is, do you agree with the Alberta government moving on to Stage 3 and removing almost all COVID-19 restrictions on Canada Day? Make sure you visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let us know your thoughts. We'll add up the results and have them for you on Friday evening's newscast. The COVID-19 numbers keep coming down in Alberta. The provinces over the past 24 hours, there have just been 73 new cases. There are currently 190 people in hospital with the virus, along with 50 in intensive care. In total, there are now just 1,150 active cases of the virus in Alberta. There are just 70 here in the South Zone. As for vaccine doses, close to 4 million doses have been dished out as of June the 23rd. The eligibility for critical worker benefits has expanded in our province. Our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, says the $1,200 payment will now include farm workers.
And there's been an expansion of this program, and it's actually quite wide-ranging, the occupations that are eligible for it. But I figured, Lethbridge audience, it's probably of note that agriculture workers of all sorts will be eligible. But it includes things like truck drivers, security guards, janitors, a whole pile of people who are, essential to the continuing function of the province. Now, the rules are sort of a little bit stringent, perhaps, depending on how people have worked in the past year. I believe you need to have reached 300 hours of work, and you also need to be making less, I believe, than $25 an hour. So some people will become ineligible based on some of the other requirements.
Mr. Dawson will also discuss how the name calling has been heating up at the legislature. He'll have details for us coming up after business news. Canadians are anxious to hear if a federal election will be called this fall. Now, a name familiar with Lethbridge is going to run against Conservative MP Rachel Harder. Devin Hargraves, who formerly ran for a seat at the Alberta legislature, is now running as the federal Liberal candidate for our city. Hargraves says the performance of Jason Kenney's government during the pandemic shows why Alberta and Canada cannot afford a Conservative government.
We've had a lot of shutdowns. We've seen small businesses are hurting and such. And now more than ever, we need a government that believes in supporting Canadians. I believe during the course of this pandemic, we've seen time after time how the Liberal government has been there for us as Canadians. And so I think The reason I'm running would be to continue to work with our government to increase supports and help get Canadians back on their feet.
A fall federal election has yet to be announced. Now, according to a new poll from Mainstream Research, 55% of Liberal intention voters say they do not want an election. Conservatives were the most keen on one, with 64%. As for the NDP, 45% were against the idea. The town of Coaldale has added 3 new bylaw officers to its municipal enforcement team. Coaldale's municipal enforcement program was redesigned earlier this year following the conclusion of the 3-year pilot program in 2019. As Carson Marsouk explains, 2 of the officers have connections to the community.
Coaldale's Town of Municipal Enforcement has added 3 new faces to the team. Over the last 3 years, Coaldale and District Emergency Services, along with the town, conducted community engagement in 2020 to ensure community needs were captured in the redesigned program.
The community really wanted to see more of a unification of all of the emergency services, so where we're working more closely with fire and with the RCMP.
Manager of Community Policing, Mark Anderson, added the new officers will be seen out in the community at different schools, visiting seniors' homes and interacting with the public. For the past 9 months, the town has only employed 1 bylaw officer. The new addition being added, Anderson says the workload will be split among the 4.
There's far too much work for one person, especially to meet the needs like school resource officers. We just didn't have the time to do that.
2 of the 3 newly hired officers have ties to the community. Devin Nielsen grew up in Lethbridge but has family living in Coaldale.
My parents moved to Coaldale in about 2012, and so they've lived here ever since. And so, yeah, definitely deep ties. I have 2 little brothers who are in school, both at R.I. Baker and Kate Andrews, so definitely a lot of ties to the community.
Scott Alford previously worked as a firefighter with the Coaldale Department for the past 5 years. Alford says he'll be able to use his previous knowledge in his new role as an officer.
With fire, we get lots of training with car accidents. So we're going to be out in the community, so there's a good chance we're going to be first on scene. So having that training, how to control the scene, how to control the traffic, I believe is going to be a huge asset.
The officers will deal with general complaints and unsightly properties. In the fall, the trio will head up north to complete their community peace officer training. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Close to 30 Hindu societies across the province, including many in southern Alberta, want their religion included in Alberta's proposed new kindergarten through grade 6 curriculum at an earlier stage. BCN's Naveen Day spoke with representatives from one local Hindu community and has the details.
The Alberta government says the draft K-6 curriculum is the first curriculum in Alberta to include direct, detailed knowledge about the Hindu religion. However, Hindu communities across Alberta are speaking up over its late inclusion. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are introducing grade 2 social studies, but Hinduism is not discussed until grade 6. Vice President of the Gujarati Society of Lethbridge, Suketu Shah, says the early stages are ideal times to teach children about Hinduism.
Hinduism is the world's 3rd largest religion right now, and there are Hindus almost in every single corner of the world. Now, when you are trying to teach social studies and when you are trying to include certain religions and trying to just tell the kids that, these are the only 3 religions which are the main religions at the age when kids have got the major grasping power, because kids learn a lot of things in grade 1, 2, and 3. This is the time that they have got the brain that is setting up and picking up the stuff.
The Office of the Education Minister responded to Bridge City News' request for an interview with the following statement regarding Hinduism's inclusion into the draft curriculum. While the current draft has students exploring ancient civilizations in grade 2, world religions are not a focus in this grade. This content will be taught in grade 6, with students learning about major world religions such as Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Sikhism. Business owner Upen Patel, who represents Lethbridge's Hindu community, says after sending letters to MLAs and Premier Jason Kenney, they were able to sit down with the Deputy Education Minister and make some progress.
We got really good feedback on that, and they are also working with us to include the Hinduism in grade 2, and there are lots of meetings going on, and they are also want partnership with all the organization, because we almost represent 100,000 Hindu in Alberta.
The province is collecting feedback on the draft K-6 curriculum until spring of 2022, which will help refine it before it is implemented across the province in the fall of next year. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Canada Day is coming up next Thursday. Now, unfortunately, Lethbridge won't be hosting many festivities, but some surrounding communities will be celebrating our nation's birthday. The hamlet of Granham will be hosting a parade and fireworks display on July the 1st. The town of Taber will be hosting a pancake breakfast, farmers market, movie in the park, and fireworks to mark Canada's birthday. Events coordinator with the town of Taber, Amy Alfred, says the day will be full of different activities throughout the town.
We're starting with a pancake breakfast. It's a drive-through pancake breakfast outside the community center at 9 a.m. on Canada Day while supplies last. We have a flag raising ceremony at 11 a.m. at Confederation Park at the corner of Confederation Park and 48th Avenue. From 4 till 7, we have our farmers market and food trucks out at Confederation Park. And then at 10:30 or at dusk, we will have our fireworks again being shot off from the golf course. You'll see them from Confederation Park. Also, during the day from 9 till 6, the Youth Do Crew and the Taber Community Against Drugs has put together a scavenger hunt all around town.
Both the town of Pincher Creek and Sterling will be offering daytime activities in their communities, including fireworks shows later that evening. The Bomber Command Museum of Canada recently reopened its doors after being temporarily closed for 6 months during the pandemic. The museum is run off of donations and houses a multitude of warplanes and bombers from the Second World War. Micah Quinn drove out to Nanton earlier today to explore this very unique place.
The museum was started after trying to save this Lancaster bomber. It sat outside for 31 years after 3 local men bought it for $513. And in 1991, the society brought the bomber inside. Ever since then, all kinds of artifacts have been collected for the museum.
Everything from complete airplanes down to little pieces that go in radios and that kind of thing. We are not done by any means yet. We're continually working on aircraft.
Fox says the museum has outgrown their current building and they're proposing an expansion.
That's going to cost about $4 million. We have part of that saved up already to put towards it, but we're going to need some big help from the federal and provincial governments or private donations towards it, and that will house the runnable Lancaster as well as the Halifax bomber at some point in the future.
One of the directors of the museum will be heading to Sweden to recover portions of a crashed Halifax bomber.
They're going to bring back a bunch of those parts and pieces and help build a complete Halifax bomber.
Once current restrictions are eased in Alberta on July 1st, the museum will be able to open up some of the more personal exhibits, like the virtual reality experience.
You're actually in a Lancaster bomber flying over Germany, and they recorded that during the war in 1943. And it feels like you're actually there behind the pilot, and you're looking around, and you can look down over the side from 20,000 feet and see the anti-aircraft fire coming up at you and the bombs dropping and so on. So it's a very neat experience.
The Bomber Command Museum will host its first event of the summer on July 24th, where they will fire up the engines of a Lancaster bomber and Bristol Hercules. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Manitobans will be able to return to restaurants, go to church, and meet with larger groups as the province brought forth its reopening plan a week ahead of schedule. Officials say more than 71% of eligible residents have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine.
This week, Manitobans met and surpassed the vaccination goals. Thank you to Manitobans for doing that. So our first reopening milestone has been hit. As of today, over 71% of Manitobans have received their first vaccine dose, and more than 27% have received their second dose. And I'm pleased to share that we have administered now 1.2 million doses of vaccine, and here's to our vaccine team for the tremendous work they've done, and everybody there deserves a round of applause from all Manitobans. We are able to move forward with reopening Manitoba 1 week ahead of schedule. Now let's keep it up. For the past few months, we've been in a race between variants and vaccines, and the variants have been winning. But thanks to the efforts of Manitobans to roll up their sleeves, not once but twice, the vaccines are starting to win, and they're beating back that third wave.
Ontario is moving to the second stage of its COVID-19 reopening plan next Wednesday, a few days ahead of schedule. Hair salons and other personal wellness services will reopen with mask requirements and capacity rules. Outdoor attractions can reopen, outdoor performances and team sports can also resume, and small indoor gatherings of up to 5 people will be permitted.
So midnight, 12:01 on the 30th of June, the province will be moving into step 2. That's to your credit. That's for the vaccine. That's what you've done when you turned out. What does that mean? In a synopsis, people are very excited to be able to get haircuts again. You can visit outdoor amusement parks and water parks. For the first time in a long time, you can gather indoors with up to 5 people, not necessarily from your household. I know that these are great rewards for you in Ontario who have made this time, and we're taking it slowly and cautiously going forward.
The province, however, will not be moving to the next step of reopening in Waterloo, which is currently struggling with an outbreak of the Delta variant. While much of the rain has stopped in many areas of southwestern Alberta, but there's still a slight chance of more of the wet stuff tonight. Full weather details are on deck. It was great seeing the rain earlier today, watering our trees, our crops, and our lawns. Tonight, there's a good chance of more rain developing with a low near 9 degrees. Tomorrow, the clouds should clear out and we should get up to 26 degrees. As we kick off the weekend, more sunshine is expected. We should see a high of 29 on Saturday, sunny and 30 degrees on Sunday. Monday, the mercury will be climbing even further. We should get up to 32 degrees. We may set a couple of records later in the week. Expect a high of 35 on Tuesday and up to 36 degrees on Wednesday. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 23 degrees and an average low of 10. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1974 at 34 degrees. And the record low was +2 set back in 1950. Sunrise was at 5:25 and the sunset at 9:43. Let's see how Friday is shaping up across the country now. Victoria and Vancouver, BC both had heat warnings today. Tomorrow expect lots of sunshine and a high near 29 in Victoria, sunny and 27 for Vancouver. It'll be mainly sunny and 25 degrees in Calgary on Friday. Expect sunshine and 28 degrees in Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 26 is on tap for Regina. Partly cloudy and 27 for Saskatoon. Sun mixed with cloud and 29 degrees in Winnipeg on Friday. In central Canada, expect a mainly cloudy day and 27 degrees in Toronto. Light showers and 26 is on tap for Ottawa. Increasing clouds and 29 in Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect some light rain and 23 degrees in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Sunshine and 21 degrees in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Sunny and 25 in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect a mainly clear sky with a high near 23 degrees on Friday. John McAfee, the security software pioneer who tried to live life as a hedonistic outsider while running from a host of legal problems, was found dead in his jail cell near Barcelona, Spain on Wednesday. He was 75. Officials say it was an apparent suicide hours after a Spanish court approved his extradition to the United States to face tax charges punishable by decades in prison. McAfee had argued the charges against him by prosecutors in Tennessee were politically motivated and that he would spend the rest of his life in prison if he returned to the U.S. Uber Canada says customers of its ride-sharing and delivery service will have to start paying sales tax due to a corporate change. Uber says it's shifting its Canadian operations from the Netherlands to Canada as of July 1st. The move means Uber users and drivers having issues with the company can engage in dispute resolutions with someone here in Canada. It also means, however, that ride-hailing and food delivery fees will be subject to a GST, PST, and an HST. The change will still allow restaurants, drivers, and couriers to claim tax credits. Luxury parka maker Canada Goose says it's going to stop making products with fur no later than the end of next year. The company says that as a part of the move, it will stop buying fur by the end of this year. Company officials say the decision to stop using wild coyote fur from Western Canada and the U.S. will transform how the company makes its products. Canada Goose has faced criticism from some animal rights groups in the past for its use of fur. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 50 points on the day to finish at 20,215. The Dow was up 322 points to 34,197. The S&P 500 was up 24 points to 4266. And the NASDAQ was up 97 points to 14,370. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 22 cents to $73.30 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 8 cents to $3.42 US. Gold was up 23 cents to $17.7540 US an ounce. And silver was even at $25.95 US an ounce. Wheat is at $338 per metric ton. Barley's also at $338. Canola is at $7.89, and corn is at $398 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 33 cents to $122.83. Feeder cattle were up $1.45 to $157.15, and lean hogs were down $4.50 to $100.03. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 81.15 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, hundreds of more unmarked graves have been found at a former residential school on the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. Chief Cadmus Delorme says the number of human remains exceeds 600. The First Nation has been examining the Maryvale school site with the help of a team using ground-penetrating radar to locate the undocumented remains located around 165 kilometers east of Regina. Both the federal and provincial governments have contributed millions of dollars towards the effort. There were a lot of fireworks at the legislature here in Alberta recently involving not only Premier Jason Kenney, but NDP leader Rachel Notley, and also Justice Minister Casey Madu. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have details for us in just a moment. Canada Day will be here before you know it, and with Alberta moving back to stage 3, it'll seem like the province will finally be getting back to some sort of a normal feeling here. To discuss this in more detail is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, the NDPs say we're opening a little too fast, but the UCPs say the opposition is ignoring the science. Either way, case counts are a lot lower, vaccination rates are about, 70%?
Yeah, that was the threshold we needed to hit in order to go into this next phase of reopening, and that'll start to see restrictions dropping off. You know, some things are going to remain in place. You'll still have to wear a mask in a taxi, for example, or on a bus, transit bus. But a lot of the other stuff is changing in terms of occupancy restrictions, gathering sizes. You can have your friends over without any concerns now. So it's so amazing to think that we're all so looking forward to going back to normal. It's like, ooh, normal. It feels like it ought to be hard to get excited about.
We can have a barbecue again, is what you're saying, right? A nice barbecue.
Well, yeah,
sure.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want, practically within the other laws that exist. And so Rachel Notley and the NDP are a little bit concerned, as sort of as opposition parties are everywhere about this, whether or not, because Alberta is sort of the first major jurisdiction to be going forward with this. So this saying, look, there are variant cases out there. Our vaccination rates are high, but that's first dose vaccinations, not necessarily second. So there's a little bit of concern there. And then the UCP is sort of turning around and saying that, this is the party of doom and gloom, and, they're always seeing, bad weather on the horizon sort of thing. So for better or worse, time will sort of tell, but all the metrics look pretty good right now with Canada Day not that far off.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to it, absolutely. Maybe a few fireworks at the same time, too, to celebrate our country's birthday, right? Yeah. Now, Premier Kenney says $8 million, Tyler, will be going to fund the search grounds of residential schools across the province. This comes on the heels of the discovery of 215 graves at a residential school site in Kamloops, BC.
Right. So this is work that is also going on in multiple other jurisdictions. What Jason Kenney announced Wednesday is an $8 million grant fund. This money will be available for groups that want to do the searches and things like that. Now, they'll be able to apply by, I believe it's the end of January next year, so 2022, and they can get $150,000, and that could be for doing these searches. It could be for erecting a memorial or something like that. It could be for, sort of hiring people to do some of the scientific work on it. And the Institute for Prairie and Indigenous Archaeology at the University of Alberta, which sort of specializes in similar kinds of work to this, they have also sort of offered to volunteer to help on this. But either way, big news, big news considering just an announcement from the province about this. So we'll have to see what comes of this in the weeks and months to come.
And the nice thing as well, Tyler, is the fact that the province will be working with a lot of the elders from different Indigenous groups as well to ensure that these grave sites are properly respected at the same time, if there's going to be any excavation or maybe even monuments put up at the same time, right?
Yes, that's right. And the other thing I neglected to mention is that this grant money will be given over to Indigenous organizations, and they'll be the ones who sort of administer the distribution of the funds. So it's sort of they're putting this money out there and it's available, and it doesn't seem like there'll be a considerable deal of government involvement in it unless sort of otherwise asked.
Now, the eligibility for critical workers benefits has expanded in our province. The $1,200 payments now include farm workers, Employers can even apply on behalf of their employees. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so this is the program that's been around sort of throughout the pandemic, and primarily in the first phase of the program, it was for teachers and nurses and I believe some also sort of low wage essential workers who are in, say, convenience stores or pharmacies or grocery stores. And there's been an expansion of this program, and it's actually quite wide ranging, the occupations that are eligible for it. But I figured, Lethbridge audience, it's probably of note that agriculture workers of all sorts will be eligible. But it includes things like truck drivers, security guards, janitors, a whole pile of people who are, essential to the continuing function of the province. Now, the rules are sort of a little bit stringent, perhaps, depending on how people have worked in the past year. I believe you need to have reached 300 hours of work. And you also need to be making less, I believe, than $25 an hour. So some people will become ineligible based on some of the other requirements, but certainly a very large expansion of this program.
Let's talk now about the vaccine or the Open for Summer lottery that's expanding. When I first heard about this, it reminded me of the car manufacturers that are having a tough time selling a certain make and model of car, so they're offering cashback rebates, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Seems like that with the lottery right now. You've got 3 $1 million prizes. There are travel perks, Calgary Stampede prize packs, and the province keeps incentivizing more and more Albertans to get the shot.
Yeah, and some of the research seems to suggest that this really does work. This sort of psychology of reward does sort of convince people to go out and get a shot that they may, not think about that much, may not be that keen on. But as you say, I mean, it's a big pile of prizes, and $3 million divvied up, I believe, as you said, 3 ways. I like those odds, Hal. That's pretty close to being like 50-50 ticket odds.
But you have to
pretty
register.
good.
Did you register? You have to register.
I did register.
Okay,
I did register, and I decided it. In the interest of journalism, I had to register, and I'll write about my fabulous life if I win.
$1 million. I mean, that's like a whole year's salary for you, so that's not bad.
Oh well, yeah.
Right?
Goodness.
Okay, let's talk about the Senate elections now. In kind of a weird quirk, Tyler, Alberta's had Senate elections since 1989, but now they're not binding, but 2 senators got seats via this process?
Yeah, it's a very strange process. So basically, the way it works in the Senate is that when a vacancy comes in, the prime minister of the time will pick and appoint someone who maybe sort of has similar ideological leanings to themselves, someone who's an eminent citizen or scholar or lawyer or indigenous activist or some other profession, and put them in the Senate. But there has long been concerns that the Senate is unelected and therefore unaccountable. So Alberta has this process in place where you can basically vote to nominate someone for the Senate. So the 2 senators from Alberta that have gone through this and are in the Senate are Doug Black and Scott Tannis. Of course, there are other senators from Alberta who did not go through the nominee process, Paula Simons from Edmonton being the one that jumps to mind. Now, as you said, it's not binding because that's just sort of not how the Constitution works at the moment. So there will be people's names on the ballots. You can, select them, and then they will be nominees. And then it'll sort of be up to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau whether or not he chooses to pick the appointees that Albertans nominated or whether he doesn't. Stephen Harper, for example, I believe appointed Doug Black when he had been nominated. So can happen, non-binding. And at the moment, I believe there's only 2 candidates, and one of them is Erica Barudis, who was the past president of the UCP, and the other is Duncan Kinney, who is a sort of left-wing progressive activist here in the province.
2 years in, and the Anti-Alberta Energy Inquiry has finally asked for responses from around 40 different groups. Now, the groups were not named, but they've been asked to respond to potential findings and to keep the information hush-hush until the report is released.
The suspense, there's not that much drama in politics some days, but man, this thing feels like it's been going on forever. It's had 4 extensions. The budget has gone up by about $1 million to $3.5 million. But they're getting somewhere. They're finally getting somewhere, Hal. They've sent out sort of requests for comment, perhaps as like a journalist would, and they're waiting to hear back. I believe the deadline to respond is mid-July. July 16th is what's jumping up in my mind. So 2 things we'll have to watch for, I would say. The first being whether or not any of these organizations leak information to the media. The second is then what the timeline for actually seeing this report is going to be and what its findings are. Of course, the New Democrats have long sort of decried this as a waste of money, a waste of resources, an anti-democratic attack on dissent and things like that. The UCP says it's going to get to the bottom of some pretty important questions. But after these delays, it's whatever you think of it, it'll be nice to, finally see what comes of this thing, I think.
Absolutely. Bring this chapter to a close. The Western premiers met virtually last week. Now, they talked about Canada health transfers, reopening the economies, but there was also a discussion, Tyler, surrounding reconciliation and searches for grave sites at former residential schools.
As I mentioned off the top, there has been sort of this discussion around the country about what to do about these residential school sites and searches. So that was part of the discussion. It's sort of the perennial, of course, demand from territorial and provincial premiers that there be more money in the Canada Health Transfer. So they did talk about that. Of course, in the context of Prime Minister Trudeau going to Europe for the G7 meeting, perhaps what's notable here is that the premiers met virtually. They weren't all in the same room, although I believe it was hosted, quote unquote, in Nunavut. But a little bit of business as normal. It's a clearing of the horizon, I guess, when politicians can get back to complaining about the Canada Health Transfer, I think.
Now, the temperature is not only heating up outside, but also inside of the legislature. Premier Jason Kenney was recently called a liar on an niqab ban. The NDP were called hobgoblins, and Justice Minister Casey Madu says NDP leader Rachel Notley is fake, phony, and deceptive. Tyler, it's grade school all over again.
It sure is, and tempers are flaring with the outdoor with the heat, I guess, and that's exactly it. There was this sort of nasty Twitter exchange that with a couple staffers and the former premier and Casey Madu, and just escalated very clearly tensions are high, and there's important issues in front of people, and Kenney either did lie or certainly misunderstood the question or misspoke on that particular query. But it is, to back up a little bit, I mean, it's a big step often right off the bat for a politician to call another politician a liar. And I do think we've seen some sort of political change on that front, actually, especially since Donald Trump was elected. But yeah, it's been ugly. It's been really ugly. And, you can't help but hope that summer's here. Go outside, enjoy yourselves, folks. There's better things to be doing than sitting and being mad on Twitter, I would say.
Let me ask you something. I mean, Jason Kenney mentioned that the Calgary Stampede's going to go ahead in a more limited capacity, but K-Days in Edmonton was canceled. How disappointed are people in Edmonton? Your big festival is gone this year.
Yeah, it's funny. I have never been a huge K-Days person, so I feel like I'm not that bummed about it. But yeah, there's a bunch of sort of big events around the province, I would say, that in theory could have gone ahead but aren't. The Ponoka Stampede, I think, has been canceled. Wow. And that usually starts on the Canada Day long weekend. In Edmonton as well, the folk festival, huge folk music festival, really big event every summer. They canceled that months ago now. Wow. And you can't help but wonder if they're kicking themselves a little bit over maybe a premature decision. So I think there's the Stampede, I think, sort of held out till the last minute, and are now going to be able to go ahead. But some of these other festivals that made the call earlier it's not going to happen, even though maybe it could have had they been a little bolder, perhaps.
And we're waiting to hear in Lethbridge about the Whoop Up Days, the big festival here in August as well, to see if that's going to go ahead. So that remains to be seen as well.
Mm-hmm. Normal's on its way, though.
Now, what about, let's talk a little sports here for just a moment. I know you love sports as much as I do. Edmonton Elks, the name. How well has it been received by a lot of the fans in Edmonton? Because I know a lot of people, true CFL fans, are like, come on, the Eskimos. Eskimos is gone, it's the Elks now, and you're going to have to deal with it.
I like it. I like it personally, and I have to say, I've actually seen more like hats and shirts and stuff out like this early on than I would have thought. Literally the day the announcement was made, I can't remember, grocery store maybe, or maybe I'd gone to pick up some food and I saw a guy in an Edmonton Elks hat. So, I think wow. It felt like there was enough time, between this discussion being started and the name being changed that people maybe had some time to adjust. But I haven't heard any significant drama over it. And maybe everyone's just relieved that it's not the Edmonton Rough Riders.
Could you imagine another Rough Rider team? That's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Thanks again for joining us today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Every so often, we hear one of these tragic stories of abandoned babies. Some of them are found alive and others aren't. We're all saddened, of course, but then we continue on with our life as normal. Well, today's guest, however, did not continue on with life as usual. Joining us to share her story is Linda Zanacco. She is the founder of He Knows Your Name Ministries and author of the book, He Knows Your Name, How One Abandoned Baby Inspired Me to Say Yes to God. That is quite a title, Linda. Welcome to Bridge City News. It's so great to have you on today.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Linda, you started a ministry called He Knows Your Name. So would you please share with us the circumstances of how that came about?
Well, really, the circumstances of my life was as a stay-at-home mom. I was raising my kids, and some of them were starting to kind of be released into the world through either getting married or going to college or whatever. But my mom had just died in June. And in October of 2009, when I really was not looking for anything more to do, my life was full and I was really grieving. I heard a breaking news story about a baby found in a dumpster. And what really gripped me was that the news headline said, "Baby doe found in a dumpster wearing only a diaper." And when I heard that, that's what gripped me. I thought, my mind swirled with questions, but I knew instantly that it was an assignment that had my name on it because God instantly flipped it in my mind and in my heart. And all I could hear was, "Doe is not a name, and dumpster is not a grave, and a diaper is not burial clothing." And it took me back to my mother's funeral just the 6 months before, where we had given her nothing but honor and dignity. And I thought, my mother was a child of God and she deserved all that we gave her, all that we celebrated. And so does this baby.
Wow, Linda, that's amazing. Now, in the years since you began this ministry, you've been to some unexpected places. So what exactly does your ministry do? So you had that on your heart, and then what did you do? What was the next step?
Well, I called the coroner's office and I asked them, a few questions. What do we do in our city, in our county, in our state about this? And their answers just really opened up a whole new world to me of injustice. And that was that we don't have a plan, really. These babies are put in mass graves and they're never named and they're not celebrated. So I knew that with every question I asked, more injustice was answered in that answers. And I thought, just put my name on the case. I really want to follow this case and make sure this baby is taken care of in death. And they were like, well, it could take a while, it's an investigation. And I was like, I don't care how long it takes. I have time and I'll just sit and wait for this baby. Like, I know this baby is on my heart and I am supposed to do something about this baby. And so I waited for 13 months, calling the coroner every Friday morning to just bother them and say, I'm really serious. I really want this baby. And in the waiting, which is so like God and so like kind of a pregnancy of expecting something, God really unfolded for me the vision of this ministry, gave me the name of it, and started showing me, like laying out the blueprint room by room of what it was I was going to be doing with him, because I don't have infant loss in my life. And I don't feel equipped or qualified to really speak to some of these issues and topics. But I really realized that it's God who equips and qualifies us and gives us the authority to do what he calls us to do. And so I just kept stepping into that. And that year formed the ministry of He Knows Your Name.
Oh, wow. So what do you do for these babies? What's the process?
Well, I now claim babies, that are left outside. I claim babies that are left at hospitals, which is really hard for people to comprehend. But there are babies, the law here in the States is that if a baby's born over 20 weeks, that baby must be released to a funeral home director and given a celebration of life with your funeral through a funeral director. And so those babies are also left at hospitals. People literally walk away and do not come back for their babies. And then there's babies left at the coroner's office, much like baby Nicholas was, where there was a criminal investigation and no one came back after all that time. And so I, by law, can claim those babies. And I have claimed 30 babies in 11 years and celebrated their life and officiated their funerals and resourced everything I've needed to give them what I think they deserve.
That is beautiful. And how many years has it been now since you've begun this
11.
ministry?
Well,
11
I'm almost
years.
going on 12.
Okay,
Yeah.
going on 12 years. That is just amazing and so sad too, but just What an amazing thing you are doing for these little souls, you know? So now your ministry has taken you to some unexpected places. Can you tell us about some of those experiences?
Well, yeah, I mean, it started with taking care of babies, and it's developed into ministries of supporting hospital bereavement care and coming alongside families of infant loss that way, and providing just needs all different kinds of resources for families, and partnering and collaborating with ministries to do that. Also, collaborating with ministries like Safe Haven Baby Box to lean into them and give them some of my stories of babies that have actually been abandoned, so that we don't just talk about the solution to the problem, we actually show the problem, and then the solution makes more sense. And so that's my collaborative relationship with Safe Haven Baby Boxes. But I also have helped to provide headstones for families that want closure at the grave. Maybe they've been able to pay for a funeral through family and community pitching in, but they've not been able to get a headstone. So I've provided about 125 headstones, maybe in about 8 or 10 different states in the country, which is
Wow.
also a really beautiful place. I mean, and I go to them and make sure that they're all dedicated and blessed.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Safe Haven Baby Box. That program is significant. That's a significant partnership of yours. So, can you explain what that program does and how you work with them?
Sure. So in December 28th, 2014, there was a baby left at a park here in Indianapolis. And the baby was found by a hiker early in the morning. And of course, we know that no baby could ever survive outside on a freezing cold night. There were tire tracks close to where the baby was found, which kind of suggests that maybe the mother had a car. And we did have the safe haven law at the time, which in Indiana allows a family to safely surrender their baby to a first responder within 30 days. And there was a fire station just 2 miles away from where that baby was found. So she was wrapped in a blue sweatshirt that said Vincennes University Aviation Department. And when I saw that on the news, I knew I would name her Amelia. And Amelia means defender. And I felt like she was going to defend by legacy the safe haven law. And at her funeral, I met Monica Kelsey, who's the founder of the Safe Haven Baby Box. And the moment I met her, and she saw what I was doing by giving this baby a celebration of life and naming her and claiming her, giving her, like letting the community all come to her funeral. There was standing room only in that chapel. And Monica shared her story with me and said, I need you to come to the Senate and the House of Representatives and give testimony to this baby's life so that these people see that this is not just a number. We're not talking about just random abandonments that we can't relate to. We need to bring the human element to this problem. And that's what I did with baby Amelia. And so her footprint is on the Safe Haven Baby Box. And that's how Monica and I collaborate with this ministry.
You are going to make me cry, I swear. So the baby box, I believe I went online and I looked at some of them. It's a little box, isn't it? Like literally.
It really is a little bassinet, like a lucite little bassinet that you would see in a maternity ward, but it's sitting inside a window, basically, like you do open the door on the outside of a fire station or hospital, and inside is a climate controlled, weight controlled, silent alarm little box that the baby gets put in. And those boxes offer an anonymous safe surrender. And once the mom closes that door, it locks from the outside. She cannot retrieve her baby. The baby can only be retrieved from inside by a first responder. And we have had in the States, we have had 11 babies safely and anonymously surrendered. Each of them have received medical care in under 2 minutes. And each of them has been adopted in under 30 days. And I've met many of them, and they are healthy, thriving babies and loving families. And it's just the most touching, beautiful solution to the crisis of at-risk moms.
Because these moms are probably really terrified, right? Because they don't want to be seen necessarily. And I can't even imagine what they are going through as well. But what a fantastic solution, Absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, I don't pretend to know their circumstances. People want to kind of say, well, how could they do this or how could whatever? And I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't need to understand them. I just know they're in crisis. And I'm thankful I'm not in their shoes. But these are women that might have immigration issues. It's, with sex trafficking and the drug issues, and just life is hard. And when women are under-resourced, they make really desperate choices out of fear. And we want to offer them a really safe surrender that helps take care of them and helps take care of their baby, but also to say we are pro-baby, but we are pro-mama too. And we want these moms to have options.
Now, Linda, in 2020, which was just recently, something very unexpected happened in you and your husband's life. Can you share about that, please?
Yeah, so Steve and I have 4 biological children. They're all adults now. 3 are married, and we have 3 grandchildren. And in this year of turning 60 years old, the last thing I ever thought I would do is adopt a baby. But this last year, I got a call from an adoption attorney friend of mine who was working with a mother who was homeless and addicted and really in crisis at a hospital downtown. And she just delivered a baby, emergency. And she said, I want this baby adopted. Well, whether she realized it or not doesn't matter. The baby was flown to our children's hospital and was immediately given critical care and was put in the NICU. And this adoption attorney tried to find an adoptive family for days and days and days that week, and couldn't find anyone to take care of a critically ill baby. And so he called me and asked me to meet with him downtown at the hospital. And I went down, and I was like, yes, of course I'll take care of this baby when she passes. I mean, that's what I do. I help take care of babies when they have the need in death. And he said, no, you don't understand. I'm asking you to take care of this baby in life and be her guardian. We need to get a judge to sign this today by 4 o'clock because there's medical decisions that need to be made. And
Wow.
I mean, my head was spinning.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
I just could not even grasp, and I said, I'll help take care of her. After talking to the whole medical team, it became very clear that they were all recommending that she be taken off life support. And so I had, after hours of talking to them, I said, that's what I will do. I just am not ready to do it today. So I headed home, and I was pulling out of the parking garage. I was sobbing, and my husband called and was like, hey, what's for dinner tonight? And I was like, I can't even breathe. I can't even talk. There's a baby, in the NICU here, and I'm coming back tomorrow to take her off life support. And the long pause and silence on the phone, he just said, you will not do that alone. I'm coming with you. And so we actually went back that night. Then we went back the next morning, and we spent the day with Abigail, Elise, and we did take her off life support. And we were told she would live 1 to 2 minutes, and she ended up living 2 hours in my arms, and breathed her last. And we just held her while she went to Jesus, and we held her and sang over her and called her by name, dressed her in a beautiful white garment, and baptized her. And it was just the most precious, sacred day of our lives. And we were so surprised when about a month later, that same friend of mine called and said, because you were guardian to her in life, you can become her adoptive family. And so we did that, and a judge granted us life adoption with her. And so her birth certificate and death certificate have our name on it. So we had our children give her her middle name, and we named her Abigail Elise, and her headstone has our name on it. And it's in Babyland here with all 20 other babies that I've claimed in death. And she has just changed our lives. And I just never, ever thought we would do such a thing, or that the opportunity would need to be taken care of in such remarkable circumstances.
That's unbelievable. We are running out of time quickly, Linda, but real quick, what advice do you have for any viewers who might be considering adoption?
Oh, I would say go for it. Call an adoption attorney, call your friends who have adopted, make sure you're educated, and go to community things and really read books. But just get going on. Don't just sit in your house on your couch and talk about it. Get active in pursuing it, because I think you get a lot of your answers to your questions through other people and through attorneys and through going to groups and talking about it. And really adopting through the foster care system is an excellent way. It's so much more cost effective, and there are so many children in the foster care system that need families. So if someone's interested, I say, please go do it. Just go, please take action. and adopt that child and become a forever family to a child who needs you.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful story. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us today, Linda. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be able to share it with you and have you guys just be a part of raising awareness and helping me educate about these important laws and these important topics that need to be talked about.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course. Linda Zanacco is the author of the book, He Knows Your Name, available at heknowsyourname.org. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.